this time we're going to get started writing an actual application. I'm super excited. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson.
I'm your co-host, Robert Green.
And welcome to part 2 of our series on getting started with XAML and MAUI. Super exciting. In the last episode, we're joined once again, I should say, by Paul Sheriff. Hey, Paul.
Hey.
Yeah, in the last episode, we gave a brief overview about what MAUI and XAML are and why they're worth your time. And this time we're going to get started writing an actual application. I'm super excited.
Yeah, that's right. We're basically going to kind of delete the default template that Microsoft gets us in preparation for building our business application. We're going to learn a little bit about the content page and the shell, and that'll be kind of what we dive in on this particular episode.
Cool.
Sweet. Let's do it.
All right. So the default template that they give us, as we saw, was that little robot, and we're going to go ahead and just basically kill all of that code in there. And then all I'm going to do is put in a label. Now, when you're building these things, you can just type, and you see we get really great IntelliSense here. And they have different attributes that you can add to each one of these elements here. So we can set the font size. Now, I really like this. Instead of actually specifying a font size like 22 points or 24 points or whatever, they gave us some really nice mnemonics here for different sizes. So that to me is really cool. Now, if you've used any other version of XAML, you probably use some things like, center, left and right, vertical and horizontal alignment. Well, now we use what are called vertical options, and we can use centering, or we can do left or fill, or centering, ending, or starting, or filling. And by the way, you see the center, end, fill, and start. You see the center and expand, end and expand. Those are actually obsolete. Those will be going away. So try not to use those at this point. All right, and there we go. So now I have created a label that's going to be centered within the content page, and that's that main page that we're on right now. Now, this isn't going to work because there was a little bit of code behind it. If you remember, I clicked on the button, and the button then incremented. That code is in the code behind back here. So just like most things with Microsoft, you double click on there and you can actually get back there. If you're on this here, you can actually hit F7 if you're using the default keyboard. You haven't changed it because obviously we can change everything in Visual Studio. And I'm going to delete the counter, and I'm going to delete this little click event here. And again, if you've done any sort of programming with Microsoft in the past, you're familiar with all these click events and things like that. But we're going to cover a little bit more about those later. For now, let's just go ahead and get rid of that. So now what I've done is I've just simply created a label on this page that's going to be centered, and I'm just changing it so we can get started building our application. So this is what's called the content page, this main page .xaml. Okay, this is a content page type, and all it does is allows us to host other controls. So you can see I've now eliminated all the stuff that's on the template, and I simply have a label now that's in a large font and centered horizontally and vertically. Pretty simple. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now notice up there you see the home right here, right? Okay. So some of the things that we can do is we can actually add a title, like so. And if I then just go back here and come back, you see the title has indeed changed. Okay. So what's neat is if you kind of just, get your screen a little bit here. Let me just go ahead and take that away for now. If we start changing things, okay, and then as soon as you move off of it, you can see how it changes. Actually, I don't need to move off of it. It's just pause for a second. And you can see it changing over here on the live screen. So this is what's called that hot XAML reload. And this is really nice in MAUI because in WPF, we actually have a designer window where you can see things, but here we don't. Okay.
Yeah. And it's nice because I think it makes it easier to experiment with different layouts and stuff, especially if you're not necessarily as well versed in web design. So yeah, it gives you the space to try new things without having to wait for every change.
You don't have to stop the app, start it, go back to where you were. You can just be on that page, even if you're 10 screens deep into the application.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So
and that works on the emulators too, doesn't it?
Correct. It does. So, if you're doing one on the Android, if you're really targeting Android and you want to use one of those emulators that we talked about before, it still works just as well. There might be a couple things like if you're designing a list and you're doing a collection view or something, sometimes those you might have to restart, but for the most part, it should work pretty well.
Yeah, if you're pure UI, it works great.
Correct. Now, you can type directly into the XAML here. You can also bring up your properties window. And when you click within one of these controls, it'll tell you the type that it is up here. And then you can come down, you could actually find the title. And once you hit enter, it will actually put it into the XAML for you. So you do have a couple of different ways that you can go about doing this. Other things we could do, we could change the background, right? We could maybe make it a gray color so you can see it's gray now. Right? So all we're doing is changing things about this main content page. Now, what about this little part up here, right? So this is the typical Windows stuff that we're used to, right? The title bar, we have the minimize, the maximize, and the close. This is what's called the shell. Now, you're not going to get this on an iOS or an Android, right? But the shell is actually controlled by the app shell.xaml file that we see right here. If we bring this one up, okay, so we could add a title on this guy as well. All right, come on, fingers, work. And now you can see the title up here on the Windows title bar has changed, okay? Now, it's not like you have to do this. You don't, it depends on kind of what you're targeting and what you want. But what's nice is you have the differences here where you can actually, the title on the shell and the title on the content page can be different. Okay? If you don't want the background, cool, that's easy. All right. On the shell, there's a couple of ways you'll see that you can do this. You could actually set the title like we did. You could also do shell.title color. You could set that to blue. Okay, so now you can see the blue here. Okay, or you could do black. I'd make it show up a little better. All right. So the shell also controls certain things, okay, about the shell and or that content page. So here you can see I've now changed that background color on the shell to gray. Okay. So lots of different things you can do here. I don't really want those right here. I just kind of wanted to show you some of the things that you can do. Okay. All right. And again, once again, if you bring up, you do the, view properties. I don't know where it is anymore. Everything moves all the time. Properties window. There we go. So again, when we're here in the shell, okay, we can bring up these property this property window, and we can change things within here too. And sometimes it is actually easier to do things in the properties window. I don't know if you guys find that, but sometimes it just is. So
I find that I never use that, but every time I see it, I think I should use it more.
I'm kind of the same way, but you and I kind of got weaned on XAML back when we were using Visual Notepad.
Exactly. But it's a great way to see all the properties in one place. So I think that's helpful if you're trying to learn more about what the things you can do.
Absolutely. And I really like that. That to me is kind of fun. But you will find sometimes items aren't really applicable here, but if you are adding some items, okay, and we'll talk more about this later, but some of these are actually pretty easy to do as opposed to having to remember how you're supposed to do it in the XAML.
Right.
Well, I do like some of these, these various designers that they did build in. So when you're doing some of the items, and for this one, and this will change based on which control you're using, Here, as you can see, there's a shell content, okay? And if you drop down this, you'll see that there's a shell item, okay? But there are some other types depending on if you've maybe loaded in some third-party software that, maybe gives you some different widgets that you could add in. So that's one thing I really like about using the properties window sometime is some of these different designers.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, cool. So another thing that I kind of wanted to show you really quickly here, and a couple of different things actually. So you can see there's a couple of different, there's a XAML live preview window. Okay, there's a live property explorer that you can see here. Okay, so when you're on this explorer, now let's go back to the main page here. Okay, and why is this not refreshing here? Did it not? Well, I thought it was refreshing. It is no name. Come on. All right. Now it might be, hold on. Okay. There was a couple things I want to show you. This one may only work when I turn on another options. This is one of the options I did want to kind of point out here too. So when you're working in here, if you go to debugging on tools, options, and you go to debugging, there's the XAML hot reload. Lots of options you can turn off and on within here. So I wanted to show you this. So again, if you want tools, options, choose debugging, hot XAML reload. One of the things you can do is you can enable just my XAML in the live visual tree. So you'll just see your stuff. You won't see any of the things that come from Microsoft. You can also enable the in-app toolbar. So let me click OK on that. And look what happens above right below your title bar here. You get all these different things. So you can go to the live visual tree and you can scroll down and you can actually see how things are running.
Yeah,
this is really kind of cool.
That's like one of the newer additions, right, to the MAUI space.
To MAUI, yes.
Yeah, it's so cool. It makes it a lot easier to explore relationships.
It really does. It really does. I like the live preview. That's kind of cool. You can do some things with that. But I use the in-app toolbar a lot because especially to kind of drill down, if I go into this live visual tree, you can look at different things here, which I think is really slick. So once you do this, if you then, let's see, bring back up that live preview. Oh, did I close it? I closed it. I apologize. Where is it? It's so hard to find everything sometimes, isn't it? Oh my gosh. So the live property explorer. So let's open this guy. So this guy, is this the one that does this? I thought this was the one that updated here. Am I thinking of the wrong? I think I'm thinking of the wrong thing. I apologize. There are so many windows, as you can see. So, but if you focus on this little area right here, okay, we have the live visual tree, which we're seeing over here on the left-hand side. That live property explorer, when you click on something, it's supposed to show you all the different things and what their values are. We have the XAML live preview, which we've seen, okay? And then there's also the XAML binding failures. I love this. We didn't have this years ago. We used to have to just pick the, select from the output window and you could see which bindings were bad. And we're going to talk about binding a little later on in this session. But if you've ever worked with XAML and you've tried to find out your binding, this window is wonderful for finding those. So these are kind of the windows you use a lot for your XAML. And that works in all of them, right? MAUI, WPF, all those. So you can select an element from here, which is really kind of neat. Okay, once you select an element, it'll show you, it'll actually update over here. You can see it move to the app shell. Okay, so when you're selecting an item, see how it's moved down here to the label, right? It takes you right to it. That is invaluable a lot of times as well. So selecting an element, there's display your layout adorners if you had any. We don't have any on this particular one yet. We can track which one is the focused element. So if, let's say we have a form and you have many data entry things, as you're moving from one to the other, it'll keep track of which one's focused and it'll update your live visual tree for you. I don't have any binding failures because I don't have any bindings at this point. So even this scan for accessibility issues now, have either one of you tried that? I've never tried that one.
I've seen it been demoed before, and I think it's pretty nice, especially when you're working with front end experience like this, and just being able to get that double check to see if what you're doing is still accessible. It's really nice to have.
We need that on the web, don't we?
Yeah, everything.
Okay. So anyway, I wanted to point out a few of those windows because those are really neat. I mean, a lot of these are kind of newer to MAUI. Some have been around though for a while in WPF. Some of them are even newer for WPF, or they've been updated, which has been really nice. So now I wanted to show you one thing. Let's go ahead and stop the application again, and I'm going to run this one more time. And when this comes out, now it does, again, it kind of does take a little longer for this thing to kind of come up. You'll notice that with MAUI apps, it gets better as time goes on, as it loads it a few more times. But you'll notice how the window does not come up full screen. Now, if you're in WPF or anything, like that, you know that you can usually just set a window maximized property. That's not the case here. But I wanted to show you how you can actually get it full screen. Now, full screen really only applies on Windows, though, doesn't it? Because if you're on iOS or Android, there's no such thing. It's the full screen always. All right. So what we typically have to do is down here in our MAUI program, what we would do is we would do a #if Windows. And inside of here, we would have to do a using statement on the Microsoft.maui.lifecycle events. And you want to wrap it into a #if Windows because we only want to have it compiled when we're running on Windows, obviously. Okay, because we only want to bring that in, that Microsoft namespace, when we're on Windows. Then what we can do is I'm going to bring in a whole set of code here. Let's go ahead and scroll down. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up a little more full screen. All right, I've wrapped now another #if here around this set window options. Okay, so this is a method that I wrote that is just some code. You can find this readily on the web. You'll find how to set these handlers, they're called, these MAUI handlers. What we're going to do is we're going to pass in the builder. Okay, what's the builder? Well, you can see right up here, we use this MAUI app.create builder to return a MAUI app builder to us. Okay, and this is how everything bootstraps, right? And they do this on MVC now. They do this on the Minimal Web API. Most things now work with these builders. This is the first program, the first class that runs this MAUI program, and then it runs this create MAUI app method, and it builds a builder. And then what I want to do is pass that builder down to this set window options, and I'm going to now configure, sorry about that, I'm now going to configure some life cycle events. And the way that this works, you don't have to understand everything that's going on in here. What's important is that we're going to get past a handle to the window, okay, the main window. And there's only one at this point, the main page.xaml. And what we're going to do is we're going to get some native window handles. So we're actually making, what is this? This is like Windows API calls here, aren't they? Right? So we're dealing with handles. All right. So then it's, even a Win32 Windows ID. Look at that. Oh my gosh, we're going way back. Okay. So Peabody just turned on the Wayback Machine. Robert gets that. Leslie's like, what?
No, I've used the Wayback Machine before.
Did you get that? Okay. All right, cool.
Oh my God.
All right. I like that.
It's still around too.
Okay. All right. So as you can see, what I've done is what I'm getting here is this variable P, okay? And this P allows me to do things like maximize. I can set whether the window is resizable or not. I can set whether it is maximizable or not and is minimizable. So this is code that is only going to get compiled in if we're running Windows. And then we simply need to call this from up here. So somewhere after you've created the builder, so after you've created this builder, go ahead and, again, wrap it within a #if Windows, call your set window options passing the builder. It runs through this, sets the maximize, so that now when we run, the main window is now going to come up full screen. So it depends on whether you want this or not, but this is customizable by you just by doing what these little handlers are. So there we go. Voila.
Ooh, that's a neat little trick.
It's kind of nice. And, you'll find that for other environments like hash if iOS or hash if Android, things like that, there's some other things that you would do, like there's some what are called on-platform attributes that you can add to things like styles and things like that, so that you can set a style just for MAUI, just for iOS, just for Windows. So there are ways to customize this for the different environments that you're going to be running in.
Cool.
I like it.
Yeah, kind of neat.
Mm-hmm. So that was a pretty good start to our application. So what's up next, Paul?
Yeah. So just a couple more things, though, that I'm going to talk about right here before we then move on to our next section. But just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, this is our project. The project has in what are called properties. These are our launch settings, but there's really not much in here that's configurable. You're not going to do too much in here right now. The platforms I wanted to talk about, these are the different resources for things like colors on the Android. So they have given us defaults. Microsoft gives us these defaults that will work on Android, on iOS, okay, whether you're running on the Mac Catalyst, okay, and Windows, of course, right? So all these things are just built in, which is nice. And then for our windows here, right, we've got app icons, we've got some fonts, we've got images. There's that little .NET bot guy that we saw. And then styles. And we're going to talk about styles a little bit later as well. Mm-hmm. And then the last file here that we haven't talked about is app.xaml. And this is where we're going to actually create resource dictionaries and put some styles. And again, we'll be covering that in a later section. But at least now you know kind of what's in this this project to start.
Great. Well, I'm excited to see more.
Right. So in our next section, what we'll start doing is we're going to start building a little user detail screen, and we'll add that on, and then we're going to just add some styles to make it look good. We're going to talk about, using some very elastic controls. So remember we talked about how we want to keep things flow layout, so it's hard coded as far as top, left, right, and all that. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of things that we're going to just start going little by little and building up here.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah, so tune in for part 3 of this very cool series on getting started with MAUI and XAML. Until next time, happy coding, y'all.